Well, it's a great virtual background, but it's also a favorite Southern California hiking trail with an ocean view, as you can see behind me. So I chose this today because a hiking trail is similar to a career journey. It can be straight and narrow, it can have switchbacks, it can sometimes, surprise you because you can't see what's ahead of you, like a steep hill, for example. So, but I wanted to just stress that you're always in charge of the pace that you hike that path. So when you want to stop, catch your breath, recharge, rehydrate, or just appreciate the view. So I always look for trails that, have something beautiful to look at as well. So we can view our career journey as a little bit like that as well.
I like this. I like where this conversation's going from the start. So this is going to be good. Okay. So one of the questions we're here to discuss is your career journey, right? And I know that, you have experienced a mix of traditional and non-traditional. Could you extrapolate on that for us and let us know, what your career journey has been like?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my career journey has been a combination of, the traditional vertical ladder progression and also kind of zigzag growth. So I've been promoted to next levels within an area of discipline. I've also moved laterally to gain more breadth of skills. I've also made some strategic moves based on my desire for work-life balance. And so let me share, some more specific detail about it. So I started off after getting my finance degree. I worked at some small design firms and, got experience with, just kind of that family business type of setting. And then I went into corporate marketing communications. And there I spent a lot of time, just experiencing a larger company. I moved up 4 ladder rungs. So, as a manager, a senior manager, group manager, senior group manager. And, each time moving up, kind of learning something new and also adding some scope from my day job. So like out of the scope. So I would work with human capital to develop employee surveys, or, there was a small affinity group at the time, very small, because we weren't in the great DEI space and kind of conversations we have today. But, we did some of those hiring best practices and things like that. So I would just kind of do projects on the side and get to know, human capital people, because that's where, to me, it's people behind the work that make it satisfying, what you're doing. And so doing that, it kind of helped me move up the ladder. And then shortly after that, during kind of my life stage at the time, I wanted to pivot into an individual contributor role. And so I made a deliberate move into project management. And while it was a step back title-wise, it gave me experience really with corporate initiatives as well as exposure to C-level executives. And I would not have had that otherwise. So a different vantage point, if you think about the hiking trail, so kind of going up the hill and then, kind of stopping for the view and saying, hey, what do I want to do? And making a decision purposefully. So saying like, what, I like this ocean view. I like where I'm at, but I also want to make a change due to personal reasons, right? So then kind of, a little bit down the hill, not a lot, just a little bit back, a step back. And then I, went laterally after that. While I was in project management, that's where I earned my PMP certification, which is not something that I necessarily aspired to do originally, but I thought, this is great. I can gain more experience, take the training, and actually be more competitive in that field. And after that, I moved laterally to a different industry in project management, and then to healthcare. And then when I was doing that, I thought, I might as well earn a professional coaching certification, because that's something that's always been interesting to me. And being in project management, you don't necessarily have the direct reports, but you're leading teams. And so I think a lot of that is driving people from point A to point B. And it's not always easy to do that when they're not in your hierarchy per se. So I kind of used that, in project management, but also leveraged it for some private clients that I had at the time with career coaching as well as life coaching. So it was a great balance for me at the time. And then after a few years, I thought, I kind of miss the people leadership part of it. And so at that point, I thought, all right, let me make another decision to kind of purposely move towards collaborating with my senior leadership at the time and kind of getting more into building that camaraderie with the management team and, kind of basically volunteering for any team building, for any of the senior leadership types of input that was necessary. And again, just kind of doing a little bit extra above and beyond, because I wanted to go further this time. And again, kind of with the hiking trail, it's like, right now I want to ascend the hill a little bit more and just get a better vantage point. And so with that opened the door to my next opportunity. I was promoted into a senior manager role. And what was interesting about that is that there were actually two roles available at the time, the senior manager role, as well as a senior project manager role. So kind of reporting to a higher level or being on the management team. And I chose the management team. And so that was a really great experience because I got to, be in the healthcare industry and really have a broader impact and utilize, of course, the project management skills, but also my coaching skills and, previous management background. So kind of just having all of that in place, doing that for a few years. And then after that, being promoted into my current role as senior director. And, that was interesting as well because I was initially passed over for the role because the hiring manager wanted to hire externally. And so I thought, that happens, right? Because we've all had that situation where we tried for a position and we didn't get it, or, there was a disappointment and so on. But what was interesting is I was asked to be part of the interview panel for the candidates. And so what that showed me in the process is that, I need to be more assertive to get what I want because this hill is right in front of me, but I want to get that better vantage point. So I self-advocated. I presented myself again, and basically along with the support from my peers, I kind of guided the hiring manager to rethink, and he proceeded with me as an internal candidate. So that was a great win, and also just a new perspective because and I'll say this a little bit later, but when you self-advocate, it doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you have to try. You don't want to have regrets on that. And then real quickly, as you mentioned, in addition to my current role, about 2 years ago, I had the privilege of co-founding the Asians United Employee Resource Group at UHG. And that was a grassroots effort, to create community and support for our Asian employees. And we've really grown exponentially over the past couple of years. So interestingly, through that side of the desk work, I had the opportunity to collaborate with some of our amazing people in our global DEI office and built great relationships. And that's actually how I got my speaking engagement here today. So I was asked to participate because I know some of those great folks there. So if you were to ask me, Meg, what's next? I continue to reinvent myself. I look for ways to learn and contribute in areas like DEI and employee engagement, and also just gain experience that I could potentially turn into a career opportunity in the future. So, as mentioned, it's very similar to this trail where you may not know, but you're in charge of how fast you go, when you want to take a break, when you want to change your perspective. And it's all a good experience.
Excellent. Yes. I'm loving all of this. And it's giving me a lot more confidence in my background because I very similarly have done seemingly everything, been in like 8 different industries, and I've been in the workforce for a little under 20 years. And so it's a lot, right? Like there's a lot of things that happen along the path, even if you don't necessarily have a map of where you're going, that very much feel like, oh, this isn't something everyone does. All right, well, this is what I'm faced with. This is what we got to do. Let's talk about some of the challenges that you faced navigating your career, especially in a leadership capacity. Do you think that AAPI stereotypes or biases have impacted you during your career?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. AAPI stereotypes like the model minority, for example, unfortunately perpetuate the narrative that all Asians are, hardworking, excel in math, we're not assertive, we're wealthy and successful, and although this might sound positive at first, it's actually very harmful because people who don't fit into the myth are often ignored or they're labeled as low performers, perhaps. And those who do fit the myth are overlooked as leaders because of it. So earlier in my career, I was overtly passed over for a management position, even though I was a top performer and I handled many of the manager's responsibilities for several months. I was actually told that, as a hardworking team player, I had to stay in my role because I didn't fit the profile of the leader, and the department didn't want to lose me. So again, it kind of sounds positive.
There it is.
There's that, all right, well, what does the profile look like? And what was interesting is that the position went to a white male who was new to the company. And ironically, he ended up getting let go less than a year later. So I just, interesting. not saying anything, but it definitely
Just sit at the side,
was
sip your tea and watch
right,
it
just
play
kind of
out.
observing. And another example, was prior to, our all popular video conferencing, right? I had a client that I worked with by phone about 6 months, and we had a really good rapport. And when he visited our offices for the first time, we were introduced. And when he saw me, he was visibly surprised, and he said, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize you were Asian. Your English is so good."
Oh
And I thought,
God.
oh my goodness, and I thought, well, English is my first language, so I certainly hope it is, because it was just a surprising kind of comment. And, again, it's kind of like, well, is it out of ignorance? Is it out of, just the person's personality or just insensitivity? But those types of stereotypes and biases have definitely, found their way in. But, I really have tried to do something different to break those myths. So, like, for example, if you were kind of known as like being quiet, speaking up, making respectfully disagreeing when I have a different opinion, even if it's unpopular. Also raising my efforts to, increase awareness and breaking down stereotypes. So first of all, we're not a monolith. Asians, right? We don't all look the same. We don't have all the same personality and skills. In fact, if you didn't know, there's over 50 Asian ethnicities and 100 plus languages, and each one has their own unique culture and customs. So, that's something that's very individual, and combined with, being American and having your own lived experiences, definitely we're not all the same. One experience I will briefly mention is at one point early in my career, I worked for an all Asian team. And because I was the only American born non-bilingual person, I didn't quite fit in that environment either. And so, whether we like it or not, conscious and unconscious biases exist. And, like that being said, wouldn't it be great if, I met you for the first time or you're interviewing and I was able to say, oh my gosh, Meg is an amazing moderator with stellar communication skills, and she happens to be a white female, right? Wouldn't that be great? Instead of thinking the opposite of, the talent second and ethnicity first. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit of how the stereotypes have impacted me, but I've really tried to not have it impact me in a negative way. It's just kind of like, all right, it happens. And so you have to just move on and deal with it, educate where you can, build awareness where you can.
I think that's a really good point. This idea of the model minority myth is so pervasive, and it's one of those things where you think you're pointing out positive aspects of that person, but that's not how it works. And so I think that if nothing else, I am glad that we're having much more open and frank conversations when it comes to how these stereotypes, how these unconscious biases affect not only the people that we work with, but the orgs as a whole. If you are
Definitely.
trying to move up within the org and you are continuously not being looked at for the kind of roles that you want because of these stereotypes, who knows what kind of influences and success you could have brought to that org that now no one's going to get a chance to see. So I think that is a really, really good point. All right. So for other people who have faced challenges like this in their careers, what advice do you have for them?
As we talked about, right, navigating your career includes challenges. I think they're likely temporary if you take a minute to examine your response. So as I shared earlier, right? So for example, the job you didn't get could be super devastating and discouraging, and it could just keep you down and just discouraged from applying to other jobs. Or it could be an opportunity to take a look at, hey, why didn't I get the job? Is it, aside from all these stereotypes we talked about, are there skills I could learn? Could I gain more experience for a role similar next time? Or for example, if a coworker or your team, people seem difficult, they're constant stress, or, it's challenging to communicate, maybe it's a chance to evaluate your own reactions and your own communication style. And improve on that, because maybe there's a way that something you could tweak or something that you could flex on to actually improve that, communication from your side. So just by pausing to adjust your response, I think, it can turn into opportunities instead. Really, some of the best lessons I've learned they started as challenges. So I'm thinking like in my early career, I had a really demanding manager who was kind of a workaholic and expected everyone else to comply with that. And that situation showed me how not to be when I would eventually become a people manager myself. So I took the opportunity to, I mean, of course it was stressful and, I had to get the work done, but I took that opportunity to think differently. I attended some trainings just to like how do great managers operate, read books, and I developed a better strategy for myself in the future. And it did pay off because in my first management roles, I was ranked in the top 5 of the high performance leaders, and with coaching and employee satisfaction. So, it can be done. So I think if you're facing a challenge, just remember there is a purpose. It might not feel good at the time, but stop and look at why it's happening, and maybe change one thing, or like I said, change your vantage point. We look at the hiking trail again, turn around. Maybe there's a great view behind you, but you're just looking forward, and so you're not really paying attention to what is around you. So that would be my advice.
I love this. There's great, tons of people in the chat comments piling in, also agreeing. Cecilia had said, be the person you want to be, not surrendering to a stereotype, and definitely do not perpetuate what others think we are by taking on the behaviors that are expected of us. And I think this is huge. And it also goes to show that a lot of fighting these unconscious biases and these stereotypes is having to be taken on by the people who are already being victimized by these stereotypes. And so I think having these conversations is crucial because it needs to be discussed outside of the demographic that's being affected. It's
Absolutely.
really, these things don't change just because the group themselves wants them to change. It has to change because everybody is in on it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about, what it's been like for you to handle, kind of a boss that's less than ideal. How, in your career history, how have you known when it's time for you to leave a role or make a career change? This can be something that is a choice that is, it can be very, scary. You don't know what you should do, where you should go. Is this going to be a mistake? So how have you handled this in your career?
Yeah, so I've kind of used some of the life coaching skills on myself. So I think some questions to ask yourself when you're wondering about it is, number one, are you still passionate about the work? Is it something that not just interests you, but you feel like you're contributing? Is your work-life balance healthy or unhealthy? And by that I mean both physically and mentally, right? Because sometimes if you're in a toxic environment, that's not healthy mentally. If you have a super long commute and you're just, not getting enough sleep and things like that, it's because you're working overtime too much, that's physical. Are you working with people who are draining you to the point of exhaustion, like the demanding, and again, I don't think there's rarely a reason to stay in a toxic environment. So that's one thing. Have you maxed out on ways that you can impact the deliverables in your current role or the audience that you're serving? And lastly, do you want to learn something new or do something new? Sometimes we're just in a position or doing the same thing for a long time. As you heard in my career journey, it's not because I was bored or because of anything like that. It's just I wanted to expand my horizons and kind of learn different skills, because all of that I use today. Even my fine arts degree, I'm not doing design work now, but I work with marketing folks. And then so I can navigate and work with them and collaborate with them in a way that is, it's educated. So it's not like I'm asking them to do something, or if they say, oh, that's going to take a month, I can say, well, I know it really could take 2 weeks, but I'll work with you on the timeline, So the other thing I would say is, contact people in your network to see what they're up to. Sometimes there might be a project you can volunteer on, or just learn about a new area of the business. So same goes for your external network. Reach out and see what's new, and you might discover a new area of interest that you hadn't heard before.
I like this. I very much like this. And I think it is also important to highlight, like you said, there's basically every reason to leave a toxic environment. Not everyone is resourced or has the luxury of doing this, which is very important to note. But I think the other thing is, as you're going, as you're listing some of these ways that we can explore our current your current setting to try and figure out, is there something else within it? I think that that's a really good point, and could kind of make that decision or the ability to pull the trigger on it a little less stressful, because yeah, you're moving into something new, but you're not leaving everything that you know behind. Then again, other people just want the clean start, right? The clean slate. No, we're gonna go blow it up and start over from the ground. I like that. Okay. All right, let's talk about some of your experience as a people leader. Why do you think empathy is so important if you are going to be in charge of others?
Well, empathy is critical when leading a team. I think if you don't understand who your people are and how to relate to them, it's going to be really difficult to have consistent success, right? So we've all been in a situation where maybe you're the new person and nobody knows you, and maybe nobody reached out. You had to reach out and kind of introduce yourself, or maybe your boss was like that. And so I think as a people leader, it's your responsibility, to practice emotional intelligence, flex with different behavioral styles, get to know your people. And having empathy is really understanding the lived experiences of your team. Everybody has a different story, and I'll just give maybe just two perspectives. In early management, kind of my first management roles, I didn't have the knowledge that I have now, right? So what I try to do is I said, all right, I'm going to make sure I can sit in my team members' chairs and do their roles the best I can to cover the work, and understand the challenges they face, so that when they're coming to me with their issues or concerns, I can understand and relate. As a senior leader now, I may not always have the work, be able to do all of the work in detail, because I have managers on the team as well that oversee the day-to-day work. But I do make an effort to get to know each of them personally. I listen, I help them connect the dots on how their work impacts the big picture. And really, most importantly, is supporting everyone to be their authentic selves at work. Because if you can't bring yourself to work, you're not going to produce the work that we need to deliver. So I think it's vitally important, like I said.
I think it's really, I like that you highlighted the idea of bringing your full self to work, because I think that a lot of people, when they think in terms of these things, they're thinking like, oh, well, it's just extra things that you're bringing to work. Like, why is this important? Why do we have to talk about it? Whatever. And it's like, no, when you're talking about bringing your full self to work in a place that you're not safe to do so, it's more about silencing yourself. It's a lot more about the things that you can then not talk about, and then things you have to remember to not talk about. So you're burning, brain space and bandwidth trying to just present an acceptable self to the workforce, let alone then all of the work that goes on above that to actually do your job. Right. And so I think that is really important to highlight for people, that we're not just talking about wanting to be able to, say what you did for the weekend or whatever. It's the extra memory and energy that has to go into maintaining some false sense of self. Absolutely huge.
Right. And that's not just for people leaders, by the way, right? If you're a team player, a team member, right? That's something that you need to also, just for the collaboration, you're going to collaborate with these people on your team, right? So it's worth it, grabbing that coffee, and just having that conversation.
Absolutely. All right, we are almost out of time today, but I want to ask you one last question. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of career advice, what would that be?
I think I would tell my early career self to listen to more to my own voice versus external influences. There were times when I thought about maybe taking a different path, maybe earning another degree, pursuing a role in a completely different area. But I was actually discouraged by others within the industry that I talked to. And so, although they mean well, generally, right, only our internal compass can guide us to our best path. So I would say that. And also, it turns out I made most of those changes anyways. It was just a little later than I planned. So that's what I would say to my younger self.
All right. I love that advice. All right. Sabrina, I just want to say a huge thank you to you. It's been really wonderful to get to connect with you today, to learn from you. I'm so happy we were able to do this conversation, and I really hope that we're able to do this again soon. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with today?
Just thanks for joining. I appreciate you spending time with me today too. And, I would just say, instead of hoping for a better past, take action to change your future. Write down one takeaway from today's session and implement it. Small steps add up to big change. And, if you have any other questions, I wasn't able to follow with all the chat stuff today, but feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Mention Power to Fly in your notes so I know you were here today. And and also check out the UHG job fair tomorrow, because there's great opportunities.
Yes.
And maybe I'll see you in Asians United if you join. But
Heck
other
yes.
than that, Nick, thanks so much for having me today. It's really been a pleasure being here and talking with you.